Well, hello, everybody. We are back again. My dad and me, Terry Jones. That was correct grammar. I usually say me and my dad. My dad and I are back. And this time we're going to the next phase of what we're talking about over these series of videos. Um, some of you are familiar with my three phases of life. What Terry's going to talk about today is the four seasons of life, which is something he's well, I mean, didn't your first elder book discuss the first four seasons?
Uh,
One of your
I
books did, because there was a
I don't
title on it.
remember. I wrote two books. I think it was in the second book.
Second book, okay. Can you move your mic closer to your mouth? I probably should have done that before we started. Sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, cool. Um, I'll let you start. You're better at this than me. I will just probably interrupt with questions, but go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this, but when you and I spoke, you were talking about how you felt there was a significant question about life for a man before 45 and for a man after 45. And so when I think about the seasons of life, that comes up for me. But let me go back first. What I've been referring to when I talk about that is my thinking that my life is in four quarters. And it isn't unique to me. For example, in ancient India, the tradition there called the ashrama comes up. They who embrace this ancient idea think about four phases of life, each one being 25 years long, which is a little bit too long for me. But what they talk about is what goes on in each of those quarters, each one of those pieces of life. And they're very interested in what happens in this midlife because there's an evaluation that goes on about one's life, how it's gone, what it's what it can be, etc. And so that fits me too. So when I think about my seasons, I was born in the spring. I grew and developed in the summer of my life. I then reached the fall of my life, which is a time of what I call harvest, because I feel like I have sown seeds throughout my life. I've planted a number of ideas and developed relationships and written books. And in the fall, I think it is time for me to do something with all that I call my life. And I'll come back to that, but I call it harvesting, harvesting the seeds. And then the fourth season is winter, which is what I'm in now. And for me, it's powerful because it is if you embrace this idea of four seasons, you know now that you're at the end of life, and that's something that is intimidating, but also a real opportunity. I can either run in fear of being at the end of my life, or I can embrace it, or I can try to understand it better, or live in it in a different way. And as I've told you, Caleb, one of the things that's come up for me in my 80s is that where when I was your age, I had a lot of regret about the past. I was kind of tough on myself about the mistakes that I had made. And every once in a while, I would dwell on that, and it was painful. And then I also was very concerned about the future, planning. That's what you're skilled at. We're trying to figure out what would be best for me next for the family, for my finances, etc. And as I've gotten into this time of my life, the winter, as I prepare for the end of life, I found that I'm dwelling mostly on the moment. I have very little interest in the past. Even the parts that were painful for me, they don't bother me as much as they used to. I don't think about them very much. And the future is unpredictable. For me, the future is kind of a strange concept because I'm living in the moment only. This is my life. This is all I have. This for me is all that's real about my life now. I can imagine what the future might hold, but I could be dead tomorrow. And so it would not be a useful way to spend my time. So I find myself drawing back into the moment more often than I've ever done before. And it causes me to be more careful with the moment. It causes me to wonder about the moment. It causes me to uh, continue to evaluate what I want out of my life that I haven't yet reached. And so then the winter of my life ends with my death. And so another thing that's become very important to me is embracing the idea of being an elder, which I've talked to you about before. One of my books is called The Elder Within, and it's basically about looking within to be a resource to the community when you get into the fall of your life. What can you give back in light of the fact that your life is simpler now, that maybe you're even in retirement? Yeah, what is it that you can do with what seeds you've sown? And for me, one of the elder responsibilities that I feel is preparing my children for the end of my life. So I have gone to the trouble of writing out carefully suggestions I have about what you might do when I die. I don't have a lot of investment in how you behave. I don't need a ceremony. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that I have established a relationship with a funeral parlor in Oregon. And so that's done for you. All you need to do is call them and they can simply help you figure out what to do with the body and the burial and that. I've mentioned that cremation to me makes sense because it's less expensive, less complicated. Um, and I have asked each of you, each of my 6 kids, to take on different responsibilities in terms of helping my estate to get settled. My daughter Amy and Caleb are both what is called a trustee in my trust. So everything that I am, that I own, is now in a trust. So there's Terry Jones, but there's also the Terry Jones Trust. And because I have defined this trust in law with the help of an attorney, is when I pass away, there's no probate. All of a sudden, my children have complete access to my wealth. And so I've asked Caleb and my daughter to kind of facilitate that process. And so I have found that it is hard for a lot of people to know what to do when their parents die. And I don't want to leave my kids with questions about that. And so I think these steps that I've written out, it's kind of a 2-page item, will be helpful in that sense and made it simpler. And the creation of the trust certainly makes it simpler. So I believe that, again, when I'm in this season, the winter, that I have an obligation to those that I care about to help them cope with the fact that I might not be here forever. When I go back again to the midlife, however, I'm thinking more about that transition between the summer and the fall. That's when I think most of us face what I call midlife. And what I have observed in a lot of people is that we begin to question who we are and what we are about that time in our 40s or so. And as life gets longer, it may be more likely to happen in your 50s. But I've talked to some of my children who have raised the question about who they are, what they want to do, how they feel about their values, where they want to be in relationship. And we've talked about how exciting that is because it's an opportunity for kind of a final evaluation. You've taken decades to create your life. And now you're beginning to wonder about the remainder of your life and what has been created and developed in the first half of your life. So I believe that if you take this time and look at what you have done, who you are, what your values are, who you relate to the best, where your bigger challenges are, what are some of your faults, and begin to evaluate what you want to celebrate and continue to be, and maybe drop some things, which could even mean ending relationships that aren't working for you. It might mean literally changing your career. It might have an effect on the way you invest your money to prepare for the end of life. Um, I never really did teach you guys how to put away money for retirement. I just kind of left you up to figure that out. And when you get in your midlife, you really have to start thinking about that. It's kind of late. And so that comes up certainly too. But it's more to me that this transition from the summer to the fall, a time of evaluation. And so in the Indian behavior, they literally go through a series of changes to say, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. I no longer want to do that, which I did in the first half of my life. And then in the ashrama, final stage, which is what I call the winter, in the Indian tradition, it's very drastic. The person leaves family, leaves the community, quits their job, throws away their money, and walks into the forest and connects with the universe. I'm not going to do that. It's too drastic for me. But I did like the idea when I got that, when I first learned about the ashramas. And those people who do that kind of wild stuff in their old age are admired in many ways by people in India. But at the same time, they have to care for these old people. They don't have any income. They don't have a house. They're just wandering in the forest and they need support. So anyway, when you talked to me first about the difference between a man at midlife and after, that's what comes up for me. I really think it's an opportunity to respond to those questions you're raising at that time of your life.
You covered a lot. I have a lot to say about this, but I want to focus this more on you. You didn't use that term, but you mentioned what I would call a midlife crisis, which I've seen lots of men go through. Matter of fact, almost all men go through this. And it's interesting that I actually know two guys right now going through this right now, a midlife, what I would call a midlife crisis. And some of them are
And
like 30.
let
Go
me
ahead.
let me interrupt you to say that for me, crisis is an opportunity. It's not bad.
Mhm.
It's a message from the universe saying do something with this.
Well, what I read was, I'll finish what I said in a second, but what I've read a long time ago was that midlife crisis means you wake up one day, and it's fascinating because I've had guys do this in their late 30s, which to me isn't old. I've had guys do this in their 40s. I've had guys doing this in their 50s. So it's a broad, it's not like it used to be when you turn 40.
Yeah.
Then in the 80s, it was like you get the big gold chain, you get the cool car, and you cheat on your wife. And that's when you're hit 40. That was the midlife crisis. Now it seems like it's all over the place. 35, 38, 42, 55. It can hit you anytime in that range. But anyway, what I read was, and this would explain me because I haven't been through this. I haven't been through a midlife crisis, but what I read, and I think this is why, is that a midlife crisis is when a man wakes up somewhere around maybe post age 35. I mean, I had a big transition in my early 30s, but that was different. A man wakes up and he looks at his life and says, I don't want this. Now, it could be, I don't want this anymore. Or it could be, I never wanted this, but I was told to want this. That was me in my early 30s. And then he freaks out. Oh my God, I have this wife and these kids or this business and this career or this country, and I don't want any of this. Oh my God. And some guys have talked to me about how nothing turns them on anymore. So their business doesn't turn them on, working doesn't turn them on, their wife or girlfriend doesn't turn them on. If they have sex with new women, that doesn't turn them on. Nothing really turns them on. I've heard that. But what I read was midlife crisis means you have woken up and looked at your life and said, I don't want this. Now, I, I have not gone through this. I'm 53. And the reason I think is because my life over the last at least 18 years has been pretty much exactly what I want, minus some details. There's some details that I still don't have that I want. But honestly, they're really details. The core of how I've structured my life makes me very happy. So I've never woke up saying, "Oh my God, I hate this now," or "Nothing turns me on anymore." I haven't had that problem, and I'm weird in that respect because most men I know have had this issue, including very wealthy men, including very good-looking men, including men who have a great marriage or great relationship. They all end up having this at some point. Does any of this resonate with what you think, or do you not think that?
Oh yeah. In fact, I'm thinking about you.
Okay.
at that point in your life, 10 years ago, you got married and you left the country.
Yeah.
I would call that a significant transition.
I would call that a transition, but it was not a midlife crisis.
What's a crisis to you?
You freak out. You don't like it.
Oh, see, I
You
don't
go, oh
think
my God. And then
I
you're
don't.
not happy. I was very
That,
happy about that transition.
that's why I interrupted you earlier. I don't think crisis is that way. So I have a different view of it.
Well, I'm using the
See,
definition that men who are going through this would define it. They would say, I'm going through a midlife crisis.
well, if it's painful for them, you bet. Yeah,
It is. It
yeah.
is. I've seen men go this painful thing that we people call midlife crisis, and they call it, and even they call it a midlife crisis. They're not happy about it. You're right. 10 years ago, I went through a bunch of transitions. Yeah. I'm going through them right now again, and they're exhausting, but they're not like, oh no, I'm not freaking out. These are transitions I'm very excited about.
Well,
And
then it may not be important in your life. It may not be important to everyone. I'm just saying that I think that the midlife is when a lot of people do an evaluation. The other thing that I think about is the man in the traditional American role. We are encouraged by our fathers to work and leave home and support our family.
yeah,
But by having to create the business that I created to support my family, I sacrificed intimacy with my family. I had to leave you all day long. And I chose to leave your mother with all the work of supporting my family while I was out there doing that. And so one of the things that I realized in midlife was that I no longer wanted that to happen. I wanted to kind of reconnect. And it's about that time that I began to speculate about what it would be like if I were to have a different viewpoint of who I was. And that's when I discovered this archetype of the ancient elder. And I began to build a life based on that thinking, which is
I
quite,
remember when you went through your spiritual awakening about when you were around my age,
yeah,
maybe mid 50s. Yeah, I remember that was a big change for you.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I went to a 10-day retreat in Hawaii about then.
That was it. The 10-day. I remember the Hawaii retreat.
And I
Yeah.
was so taken with what happened to me there that I didn't call your mom for many days. She was scared by the time I finally
Yes,
called her because she didn't
it
know what
was.
the heck I was doing.
Right.
And so, yeah, I was really taken with that. And so I began to rebuild my life at that point.
Yeah. And that's also around when you retired or started pulling back, because you started pulling back when you're about 55-ish. You didn't retire, but you started really pulling back right when you sold it to Bill. Was that about 55,
Yeah.
56? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And those who don't know, so my dad had a mental health company that he sold to his CFO. Well, no, you didn't. You sold to a bigger company. You sold to a competitor, right? Or
Yeah,
is that
that's
right?
right.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then he retired. Yeah, I remember that. And for a while, you were into what they used to call New Age. I don't think you're into that anymore, but that was one of the phases you went through. But I remember a lot of that. Yes.
Yeah, because I was experimenting. I was
Yeah.
looking for where can I put my handprint? Where should I now go? Because I didn't have a lot of answers. I just knew I wasn't satisfied. And one thing that's different between you and I is I didn't like working. I was done working.
Oh, I know you didn't like it.
I up to that my whole life I never worked more than 40 hours a week. I
Right.
was home every Christmas for 10 days. I never was that passionate about it, even though I was successful in work. I was ready to get out of it when I got into my 50s.
Well, you didn't like, we could talk about that if you want, but you didn't, this is how you and I are almost opposite when you were working, when you were around my age. You didn't like your work you didn't, that didn't excite. I mean, it was something to do. And there were aspects I think you liked. Because remember, I worked with you when I was in high school. I saw how unhappy you were. You
Yeah,
were. And
yeah.
you didn't like your work. You didn't like running a business. You didn't like dealing with all these dumbasses. You didn't like therapy. You didn't like any of these people.
No, I started out working in a field that did turn me on, mental health and
Right.
helping others and so forth. What got difficult was I created a business out of it and I became a corporate head and I had to run the business. And
Right.
the people that I hired began to do the clinical work that I let go of. And so, yes, after 10 or 15 years of that, I was done.
Yeah, I remember how unhappy you were. But I also remember you telling me, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, that when you were doing counseling, or at least the type of counseling you were doing, because so for those of you who don't know, my dad started from zero. He started in the middle of a recession, which was the late 70s, early 80s, when we had like 18% interest rate. That's when he started his company. And he started just one-on-one therapy stuff, and then he started hiring people, and he grew and he grew. But I remember you saying something like, and I could be wrong, maybe I'm not remembering this right, but you're like, I did therapy, or what do you want to call it? And you said, but I didn't really like it. I didn't like doing therapy after a while, and so that's when you started the business. But then you didn't like the business either, or is that not true? Did you enjoy the therapy? I thought you said you didn't like it, or didn't like the type of
Yeah,
therapy you were
I
doing.
think you're close to it. For some reason, I got into it as a business because I went through therapy myself. My life went through a lot of changes. And so I got into the whole idea of mental health and developed and changed, and I was impressed by that. And so I wanted to do it myself and for others. But you're right. When I got to actively doing it, and that's all I was doing, I think there was other things I would rather have done.
Yeah. It's fascinating that you were successful. You became a millionaire doing a business you didn't really like. And that's pretty hard.
Well, that's consistent with what I saw as the model for the American male.
Yeah.
I sacrificed because I wanted to build safety for my family.
Yeah. And you had a gigantic family, unlike me. You had five children, well, six children, plus a stay-at-home mom, plus a bunch of dogs and cats. And when I've mentioned about you, when I talk about you in my audience, is that you were the last generation. You were in the 70s before you started your business. You were a lower income man supporting a family of seven on your lower income. This is before you started your business. And you were the last generation of American men who were able to do that. Today, a lower income man can't even live by himself. He has to have roommates or live at home with his parents because the economy and inflation, all this horrible shit, collapse the West, and all these things that are happening. So, yeah. So maybe that was not maybe, that sounds like you're saying is the reason you were successful because you had those needs.
Well, I was also I'm very proud of this one. Very lucky. I got excited about the idea of mental health. At that time, I was working for the state of Oregon, and I began to watch a transition that was occurring in industry. Industries started to look at their employees as human beings. And they literally would go out and bring in recovering alcoholics who had worked for the company and had a successful recovery. And so the company paid them to watch out for that problem among other employees. And it developed a name, a troubled employee program, or it became an employee assistance program. So what I did is I went out and created one in Oregon, and mine was the first because there was no competition. I had to work at it. It took me a year or so to get where I had some income, but there was a clear market for it. And so I was able to take my interest in the science of mental health and turn it into a successful business. But you're right. I probably would have had more fun doing something else.
I'll give you the opposing view because what you're talking about is the implication that the American model might be bad. But let me give you an opposing view, which is I partially agree with. You know, Bob's Red Mill?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe I never told you this. About 25 years ago, long time ago, I interviewed Bob. Bob's a real guy, and he's in Portland. It's a world. Those of you who don't know, Bob's Red Mill, when you go to your grocery store, and it's all over the world, it's in Dubai, it's all over the world. You go to the grocery store in the fancy, where you could buy the fancy like flour and the fancy pancake mix, and it says Bob's Red Mill. It's a little picture of a little old man with a beard. Well, that's a real guy named Bob. I'm sure he's dead now. He was probably in his 80s back then. And I spent the whole day with him. He took me on a tour of this whole facility, and I sat down and interviewed him. It was great. And what was interesting, he said this. He was about your age back then, maybe late 70s, early 80s. And he said, here's the problem. And this is back in the early 2000s. This is not today. This is 25 years ago. He said, the problem is that I have a bunch of grandkids, and I got 4 or 5, 6 grandsons, and they're all in their early to mid 20s. And they all live at home, and they either don't have jobs, they work part-time, and they play video games, they screw around their computers all day. He goes, now, when I was 23, back in whatever, the 40s, 50s, I had, this sounds like your dad. I had a wife, I had 2 children, I had a car, I had a job, I had a house, I had to support a family, and I was out working. And my grandsons just kind of sit on their asses all day. And that's not how it was, when I was da 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 da. And he was kind of talking about the modern day generation. And I remember myself thinking at the time, I was 28. I was in my 20s when this happened. Although I was kind of like him. By the time I was 28, I had a wife, I had a business, I had a house, I had 2 kids, I had all that same stuff. So I remember kind of agreeing with him, saying, yeah, this is kind of a problem with men my age. You're kind of right. What do you say about that?
Um,
It's complicated, isn't it?
I don't know why, but another thought came up while you were talking to me. It doesn't really relate to your question, but I'll give it to you anyway.
Okay.
One of the things that occurred in the 70s was the women's movement began to evolve.
Correct.
And
That's when women started entering the workforce. Right.
and one of the major books that supported them was Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique.
Yes.
Well, not long after that, there was a lesser known book came out called The Masculine Mystique. And I was really taken with it because what the man that wrote that book was talking about was that men are boys. They are in a big body, but in much of what we do, the way we walk through life is kind of childlike. And I have had a real sense of vulnerability my whole life that is kind of like there's a little Terry in me, and it gets hurt and it gets angry and it doesn't have defenses. So I was 2 men, kind of like, well, I'm not sure it relates to your question, I'm sorry, but it felt to me like I was the man that you saw, creative and successful and married and so forth, and I was this little boy that was the emotional part of that man and who was very vulnerable, had fears, and I haven't lost that. That is still there in my 85th year.
I think that's pretty typical. And tell me if you want me to redefine these again for you. So I have 3 categories of men: beta male, alpha male 1.0, alpha male 2.0. And the category you were in most of my life was alpha male 1.0. And you just kind of described him, someone who is confident and successful and masculine and gets things done, but is also reactive, emotional, very outcome dependent, gets offended very easily, gets angry easily, gets reactive easily. There's a lot of men like that in the world now. It's most men are beta males, are the pussies, and that's become the societal norm. It wasn't back in the 70s and 80s. That's one of the biggest differences between me growing up in the 80s and me seeing now is the number of men who are betas. But anyway, but yeah, and then you made the transition when you're in your 50s, 60s, when you softened. And I remember Jeremy saying something like, I like the new you to you. um, I don't know how that relates to what you just said, but that's you're saying you still have some of that inside you, but you're different now. And yeah, you're very different now, right?
Not different in the sense of knowing that I had that vulnerable part of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're not reactive like you used to be, though.
no, I've grown up a little bit. There's certainly skills that I've developed in having had a long life. Uh, Back to another point you made about the type of male you think of. I belong to, I think I mentioned this earlier, a very large men's organization, international, called the Mankind Project. Uh, Close to 100,000 men have gone through and joined to become active and left, some of them. And one of the things that's happened is this was a powerful men's movement where we would be initiated with some powerful rituals, and masculinity was targeted and was really considered, but has become, in the words of one man I know who's in it, more feminized. This
Yep.
group of men have become less expressive,
Yep.
and women are beginning to move into the organization, like on the board and putting
Yep.
and getting involved in some of our programs. And I'm sitting here saying, what has happened to us? Because it was
Yep.
for me such a wonderful transition to be monitored and initiated by that organization, which now has changed.
Yeah, I say that we are now living in the Western world in a post-masculine society. So in terms of pop culture and how business culture, things like that, it's all shifted to the more feminine. Not 100%. You still have sports, but that's about all you have left for men. And if you're not into sports, you don't have very much at all. So yeah, and I could give you statistics and data on that, but yes, what you're describing has happened to Hollywood, TV shows, government aspects of government, not all government, corporate America, um, academia, um, the news media, minus podcasts. So what you're talking
And
about has affected most of pop culture, most of
and
society.
today, because of that transition, we're being manipulated by a monster. We're being told where to go. We're being attacked and pushed around by our own president. And I don't blame him for that. It was the majority of Americans who decided we want a man like that in the White House, which I think is another expression of that change in power that men expressed when I was young.
Trump is a reaction to everything you and I are talking about.
Yeah.
This started in 2016. So it happened in 2016. I'm oversimplifying this, but this is what happened. This post-masculine culture was yelling at men and yelling at men and yelling at men and stop being racist and stop hating women and stop raping women and stop this and stop that and stop this and stop that. And most men were like, I don't hate women. I'm not a racist. Well, you need to stop. And so finally these beta males say, all right, fuck you, Trump. Fine. You want to act that way? Trump. And Trump was the overreaction to this. And when you say the majority of Americans, as I remind Trump supporters, it was about 1.5% of the popular vote he won from Kamala Harris. So it's a sneaky little teeny tiny majority. People are still mostly left, including Trump supporters. If Trump just passed a bill that spends $3 trillion more in spending. So as a libertarian, it drives me crazy. But most Trump supporters are like, okay, so what?
Whether they're left or right, we have put him there.
Yes. But that's why. It's a reaction to everything you're talking. If we had not moved into a feminine world, Trump would have never been elected. He would have been laughed off the stage in 2016. That's a fact. Yeah.
Why do you think we're becoming more feminine?
Well, we talked about this before. There's several reasons. There's scientific reasons and there's cultural reasons. So the scientific reasons are testosterone levels have been dropping, sperm counts have been dropping since the 40s in men. And a lot of that's environmental. The water we drink, the bottled water, the horrible food, the chemicals in the food, the more sedentary lifestyle. We're getting off the form. We're not even working in office. We're sitting at home all day on our computers. So these are scientific environmental factors. So that's one reason. The other reason is as Western cultures, not Western, as any cultures collapse, you can read about this with the collapse of Rome, they move more into you could call it a left wing, you could call it a feminine thing. They move more in that direction culturally. That's just what happens when empires and nations and cultures become very rich and powerful. They start getting lazy. They start feeling guilty. I mean, look at Germany, the most guilty country. Germans hate Germans. Germans hate their own culture. And America's moving that direction. The UK is kind of already there now. They start to get guilty about what they have. And that all pushes against the masculine and more into the feminine. So it's those two reasons.
And I've got this mixed feeling about my grandchildren. I've got some really wonderful boys and girls that are my grandchildren, and most of them have the ability to cope with the internet and technology. But at the same time, they're losing a connection to one another. It scares me for their sake, having lost the ability or the power, I guess I would call it, to take charge and to be in a movement that's stronger.
The number one reason why most Americans are so unhappy as compared to other cultures and other countries I visit, and I can feel it as soon as I land in the United States, I go, oh my God, because I don't have that here in Paraguay or Dubai or most other countries. People aren't walking around pissed off about politics and mad at each other like Americans are. Number one reason is because of those phones, is because of social media and swiping. And what's fascinating is that Steve Jobs, when he invented the iPad, wouldn't let his kids use it. So Steve Jobs was evil. He was an amazing businessman, and I emulate a lot of stuff he's done in business. But in terms of his morality, he was not a good person, and he's created a machine that kind of has damaged America culture permanently, which is really sad. But it's fascinating that he wouldn't let his own kids use this in 2010. He wouldn't let his, oh no, don't let, that's addictive and it's going to make them angry. And well, dude, why are you giving that to the whole world? So social media, starting with Facebook, and then the swiping on the phone combination. Now there's benefits to social media too, but I wrote an article a few years ago saying, is social media net positive or net negative for the world? And I had to examine that because I wasn't sure. And what I came up with, it's a net negative for the United States. There may be other countries it's a net positive, even with all the problems, but it's been a net negative for the US for the culture, including especially for young people. Because I see young people, people under the age of about 32, very unhappy, men and women, girls and boys. And I see it nonstop. It's really awful. I've never seen anything like it.
One of the things I'd like to talk about with you today before we finish is this idea of happiness, because you really got my attention about that.
Mhm.
Because your goal is to be an advocate for our happiness.
Yes.
Um, and you've said to me that men are more capable of that than women.
Yes.
And so I want to talk a little more about how you define happiness. When I think about me acting happy, I understand that, but then I go through moods or difficult times or depression, and I don't look happy anymore. But that doesn't mean I'm not a happy person. It doesn't mean that I have lost my happiness. It means that I'm human. So tell me what you mean when you say that men have that potential to really maintain a consistent level of happiness. What does that look like?
Well, to your point earlier, it depends on how often you go through these quote moods. I've had people in my audience say this. Well, Caleb, look, I'm a happy guy, but I'm moody. And I get mad sometimes. And I get depressed and I get sad. Okay, how often? Is it all the time? Then you're not a happy person. Is it once a year? Then you're a happy person. So it's frequency. What is the frequency of the negative emotions? Now, what people will say is, and you can interrupt me whenever you want, well, the reason I'm mad is because I said, that's not relevant. You can arrange your life. That's my entire book, The Unchained Man, is about doing this. You can arrange your life so that less things happen to make you unhappy. Well, I'm mad because, good.
Oh, let me say that. One of the things that I believe is different about men and women is that women are more able, more inclined at least, to show emotional conditions. Men
Yes,
are more secret about that.
very.
So if we look at the question of whether she or he is happy, she's going to look more unhappy because she's willing to show all these different emotional expressions. That doesn't say to me that she's less happy. It just means she gives you more information about who she is as an emotional person.
True. That's accurate. That's a very good point. And I would equate the man who sucks up his anger and balls it all up just as bad as the woman who cries and throws a fit at the office. Those are both equally bad because neither's happy. But you're right. There's a statistic when you and I, or maybe someone else to talk to, this is, oh, I think, yeah, you and I were talking last time about how I have some anecdotal stuff. And my examples of, this is an example of how anecdotal data can help if you have a large sample size. So to your point about women being more expressing emotions, I've been in the corporate world / business world for about 35 years. I started when I was very young, as you know. And so I've worked with literally thousands of people, hundreds of companies. And in that time, I have seen about 8 or 9 women cry in the office, cry in the workplace, cry. Not like little tears, like cry. In that entire time, now I've seen, in that entire time, I have seen 0 men cry at the office. I've seen men get angry and lose their shit and lose their cool. We've all seen that at the office, but I've seen women get angry and lose their cool at the office. And it's about the same. I don't see men getting more angry, lose their cool 8x more than women do. So there is a definite difference in how the ability for women to stay happy for long stretches than a man to stay happy for long stretches. And let me repeat really quick before you say this. I've said many times, most men are not consistently happy. They have that ability, but they're not. Most men, especially Americans today, are mad and pissed off and stressed out, and they're still unhappy all the time too. I'm just saying that it is easier for men, often, mostly, not mostly, but in great part because they are simpler creatures than women. Do you know who Bill Burr is?
Yeah.
Okay, he's a comedian, and he talks about how his wife is jealous about how simple he is. He goes, my wife is complicated because she's a woman and I'm a man. I'm really simple. So I can just get home from work, sit my ass on the couch, drink a beer and watch the game and be happy. And she can't do that. So she comes over and nags at me. It's a joke he's making. But there's some truth to that. We can actually be happy because our needs are less. Chris Rock, another comedian, has said about, what do you ask a woman? What do you want to be happy? She says, I want everything. Now, what do you ask a man? And he said, his joke is food, sex, and silence. Feed me, fuck me, and then shut up. And then I'm happy. But women are not like that. Women need all kinds of things to be happy. Anyway.
Isn't it a phenomenon that, however, men are in power, they have the
Yes.
money,
Mhm.
they're the abusers, they're the difficult sex. At least that's the bias that we.
Well, do you got to define difficult? Yes, I agree so far.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe they're simpler, but they are able somehow to take their abilities and take control. Now,
You
I
know
think,
why they're able to do that? Because
right,
men like men. Men can work with men. Here's another thing I've observed in the business world 35 years. You get a group of men together, even if they hate each other, they can kind of get shit done. You get a group of men and women together, they can kind of get shit done. You get a group of women together, maybe they can get shit done. Maybe they say, well, you fucking bitch. And they start hating each other and they can't get anything done. There's a reason why women have not taken over the earth. And this is partially a joke that I have, but I believe this. Women hate women. They immediately start attacking each other. Women, even feminists, hate other feminists. There's a huge thing with feminists hating other feminists that you don't see on the right or with men. Rarely.
why then are more women appearing in leadership in business and industry and education? And also, why are more of them going to college than men are?
What I just said, you're in a post-masculine world. Women are now having to replace the men.
Uh,
Women are replacing men in the workforce, not the workforce, in the management area. They have already replaced men in college. So more women go to college than men. Women in their 20s, as long as they don't have kids, make more money than men in their 20s. And that's been for like 10 years now. I've been quoting that statistic forever. Because men have backed away and women have to fill the vacuum. You will hear women today talk about how men are pussies and their boyfriend's a pussy or their husband's a pussy, and she has to kind of man up, and they don't like it. Some women do like it. A lot of women don't like it, but they do it. That's why. Men did this.
can a man as simple as we are become alpha male 2.0?
Yeah, it's easier if you're more simple. That's why women can't be alpha 2.0 or alpha female 2.0. They're too complicated. If you give a man, I'm generalizing now, so your favorite, I'm generalizing. If you give most men, not all men, most men, a decent amount of money, that's important for a guy, a decent amount of money, and I talk about $85,000 a year or more, because there's statistics and science behind this,
Yeah.
and regular sex, not having sex every day, not sex with 20 women, regular sex, and he's relatively physically healthy, he has the potential to be happy for the rest of his life. If you gave a woman those things, she would still find 10,000 reasons to be unhappy. Not all women, but a lot. And the women I have found that tend to be more happy tend to be the more masculine women. Women who are a little more boyish, not lesbians, not gay, but a little more masculine on the personality scale.
One thing I wanted to ask you about that relates again to what a man is. You've talked about the behavior of early men, cavemen,
Yeah.
but we don't have any evidence about that. Where do you get those impressions?
We have lots of evidence.
Give me an example.
I've read at least 3 different books written by anthropologists. Some of them I sent you in that email the other day.
Those are opinions. Those are not based on fact. We don't have any anthropologists who can tell you how the original male behaved sexually.
We have evidence to suggest, you're right. We weren't there. It's true.
I've read
All I
some,
can go with, it's like saying, do you believe in God or not? I don't know, but I have evidence to suggest.
you do?
For God?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big conversation, but you bet.
Well, just
Not
give me,
not the Judeo-Christian Muslim God. There's no evidence to suggest that. That's a fairy tale. But a creator and intelligent design, oh yeah.
yeah, I think one of the things that I struggle with when we talk about our viewpoint is that I don't believe there is very much concrete information that would lead me to the same conclusions that you have. I understand that you
Why is
have,
the divorce rate so high? I could give you one of 10,000 statistics. I could
oh,
ask you
that's
why do
concrete.
people cheat so much? Why do people cheat on their partner so much if monogamy is how we're wired?
Well,
You talk about
that's,
monogamy or something else?
no, I'm just talking about when we make assumptions about things that we don't have any real good data about.
Oh, it's called preponderance of the evidence. Did I see
And
the murderer walk in with my own eyes and stab the woman? No, I didn't see that, but I see the bloody knife. His fingerprints are on the knife. He doesn't have a good alibi that night. It's preponderance of the evidence. So when I see all the anthropological data, plus people cheating on each other, plus the divorce rate, plus how women back off on sex after 3 years in a live-in marriage or relationship, plus 27 other things, clearly the preponderance of the data shows us that human beings were not designed to be sexually monogamous for more than about 3 years. And the evidence is it proof? No, but the evidence is overwhelming.
well, it is impressive to me how many people trust you, follow your thinking, follow your work that you do. And I've looked at some of the comments that have been made about our video, and clearly those people are uh, enjoying what you're teaching them. I just think that for me, because I think because of the generation difference, you pointed this out, how
Yeah.
much different it was when I was a boy.
Yeah.
That,
This is
that,
what you and I are kind of talking about as our generational differences.
yeah, oh, very big.
Monogamy in quotes, I call it monogamy in quotes, worked when you were raised in your world. For 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, monogamy in quotes. People still cheated, but you didn't have divorce rates and things like going on. You didn't have that in your era. So then I present this to you and you go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, no, in your world it doesn't make any sense. But your
Well,
world has been gone for 40 years, 50 years.
I have always believed, like you do, that marriages didn't work in the 50s.
Yes.
What we did then was to not question what was going on. We didn't
Right.
want to change anything. We wanted
Right.
to hold on to whatever we had because
That's
we
right.
didn't have the nerve to try and do it differently.
Therefore, monogamy still didn't work in the 50s. Marriage worked in that the divorce rate was very low, but people were unhappy. People hated their marriage. When you try to get divorced, the judge would kick you out. You're going to try to divorce, get out of here, get back to your wife. Next case. Things like that. People cheated a lot. Right. So monogamy has never, long-term monogamy, I can be very clear. Monogamy expected to last well past 3 years, has never worked because human beings were never designed for it. But there have been eras where a marriage has worked, sure.
Yeah, I suppose the audience needs to know that I have not had success with that either. I've been married 3 times, and um, I'm
Well, if you
still.
think monogamy, well, go ahead and finish your thought and I'll ask you a question.
I was just going to say, I've been wondering if that isn't necessary. I had to go through different relationships to get where I am now, which I think is a healthier place in terms of how I look at relationships.
I agree with you. Imagine if you were still married to Judy today. Would you be happy?
Wow, who knows? That was a
No,
long.
you know. By the way, Judy's his first wife when he was very young. No, the
Well,
answer
no,
is no. The answer is no. We could say it. She's passed away now. It's okay. What
I
if I was still married to my first wife? Would I be happy right now? No. Nothing against her. I married the wrong person. Nothing against her. She's a wonderful person. But would I be happy still? So the only way to figure this out is to be with several different people minimum. How is that lifelong monogamy? Again, it's not. So there's two possible things you can say to me or to anyone. A, Caleb is wrong. Long-term monogamy does work as long as you find the right person and you're a good person, which is what like traditional conservatives would say. Or B, I don't like what Caleb is saying, which is different than Caleb is wrong. And it sounds to me like you're more in B than you are in A, which is where, and most people today, when they don't like what I'm saying, they don't say, no, Caleb, you're wrong. Here's a bunch of statistics that prove that monogamy works great as long as you, they're more into B. Like, Caleb, I don't want to hear this. This is, it's, you see the difference?
Yeah, but it's not just because I don't like what you're saying. I want you to be successful and happy. And I'm afraid that some of your theories are going to screw that up. That's the only reason I don't trust a lot of what you're
You're
saying.
talking about me and me or people in general,
No, you.
successful and happy.
Yeah.
I am successful and happy.
Yeah. Well, that's what I want for you. And I worry sometimes that some of your creative ideas, which are very unique in this world, might get in your way. So far, you're doing okay.
No, they don't get in my way. They make me very, very, very happy. Are they
Well,
perfect? No, there's no such thing as perfect systems when you're dealing with human beings.
that's
So if
what
I've
your
had,
father wants.
what's that?
That's what your father wants.
You were successful in raising a very happy son. You scored with me. I can't comment on my siblings, but yeah, I'm extraordinarily happy. I will also submit, and I said this to you, but my models are more complex than date a girl and make her your girlfriend. That's real simple. It doesn't work. It's going to make you miserable, but it's very easy. Have sex with a woman a few times and then say, can you want to be my girlfriend? Okay. That's real simple. I have an entire model that takes 4 months and there's 4 phases and there's certain things you do and the cardinal rules and soft net. You got to learn all these systems. But then once you learn them and do them, you will be way happier for the rest of your life.
That's another reason why I'm not comfortable with some of your theories. I can't do that kind of stuff.
Well, but it's
I
not
don't
my,
want to
but
work.
my,
I don't want to work that hard. I'm just
right.
more
But you're not the target demo for these things. A man in his 80s is not the target demo for Alpha 2.0.
No, I've always been this way.
This is why I said in one of our prior conversations, only about 10% of men will go for this. What you just said, 90% of men go, I'm not going to do that. That's not, and I'm not going to do that can come from what you just said. That's too much work. Or I'm a Muslim or I'm a Christian. That's against the Bible or the Quran. So I'm not going to do that. Or what would my mom think? A lot of guys like that. What would my dad think? Even though they're in their 30s and 40s. What the fuck, dude? Or my wife would never let me do that. That's beta male stuff. So there's 7 or 8 reasons why they would never do it. But yeah, most men, even if they secretly agree with the stuff I'm talking about, are not going to do it. And I'm aware of that. That's why it only appeals to about 10% of men who are, I want to use the word evolved, but some word to describe open-minded enough to say, oh my God, I would do that. It would be worth the work. And that would make me very happy. Because I know it makes people happy. I've got thousands of men who are doing this and they're very happy with it.
You got big balls. There's no question about it.
But big bones.
Yeah, and that's required, particularly in the world the way it's going right now. So,
Oh yeah.
congratulations.
Well, also Alpha Male 2.0 is far more compatible with how the world is today than how the world used to be, and or how human beings actually work. If you say, let's get married, and I'm 20 and you're 20, we're in love, let's get married and have kids and be together forever. Your psychology, the biology, society is all against you. Alpha Male 2.0 is very aligned to A, how people are actually working, and B, the very difficult, fucked up era in which we live in terms of Western collapse and post masculinity and the collapse of the United States and all these other things going on. You can take Alpha Male 2 and plug it right into that model and it works great.
The only part of that I question is it's what you have done in terms of leaving America to find more control over your life and not others telling you how to live. That's not something most men can pull off.
What did I say? 90%.
Yeah.
That's right. Most men are going to, I tell guys all the time, you need to leave America. Why are you still voting for Trump or Kamala? You're a moron. Leave. And most men, even men in my audience go, well, but we have to fight against the billionaires. We got to fight against the woke people and they won't move. They're going to stay in America and go down with the ship and they don't want to hear it. You're right. Most won't. And that's okay. 10%. That's why I said earlier, I don't care about 90% of men. Yeah, 90% of men, because they're not going to do what's necessary to make happy lives. So then why do I got to worry about you? Have fun being angry about Trump or Kamala or billionaires or whatever. And I'll be over here being happy. I'll be in Paraguay and Dubai and living a great life. And so will the other 10% of men who've chosen to do this.
Yeah, I wish your brothers could spend time with you like I am, because they think you're crazy.
Yeah, of
And
course they do. They're
yeah,
normal.
they're very different than you are, sure.
Right.
But
They're
it,
more
but,
normal. And
okay,
both my brothers, well, I have 3 brothers. 2 of my brothers are very feminine compared to me. So when I talk to a feminine, more feminine man, they go, well, I would never do that. Well, of course not. You wouldn't. Right. That's okay.
well, what I have really appreciated about our time together, I'm looking forward to more, is that I'm beginning to understand you better. I certainly haven't understood all of that you believe in as much as I've begun to learn now. And I'm going to have to look more closely at how much of it I'm still questioning. I'm questioning less, but I'm not sure why, except that it seems to be working so well for you.
Well, one thing I will add, then we can, if you need to go, we can wrap. Well, you keep forgetting, you have plenty of time. Uh, the only, in my opinion, the only valid argument against the models I talk about, and this is an argument some people give me, is that, Caleb, I don't care about being long-term happy. That's not my number one goal. Excuse me, that's not my number one goal is to be a good father. Or my number one goal is to serve my wife. Or my number one goal is to be a good Christian. Or my number one goal is to be a good Republican. Or my goal is to save the planet, the environment. Or my goal is to, and if I'm not happy, if I'm not nearly, well, then that's, so what? Happiness isn't the meaning of life. There's a bunch of famous people on the internet who I don't think you know. Do you know who Jordan Peterson is? Probably
Don't
not.
think so.
Okay. Famous guys on the internet, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, who are big name people on the internet, they submit to the model of happiness should not be your goal. Happiness is, you should have meaning. And if you're miserable sometimes, that's the way it goes. Or in some cases, happiness is for women. That's not a masculine thing. A real man's not walking around happy all the time. So if you come to me and say, and some men do, happiness is not my number one goal, Caleb, these 2 or 3 things are more important to me, then I would say, you're right. This model is not for you. I'll make you miserable. Matter of fact, I even say, don't watch my videos. If happiness is not your number one priority, you think that's bullshit, don't watch my content. I'll drive you insane. I'll make you so angry because everything I talk about is maximizing your long-term happiness. And there are men, religious men, right-wing men, left-wing men, and women, well, happiness, pff, great. So that's the only valid argument against what I've taught about is there's some men who will say, happiness isn't my objective. A lot of women will say that too, by the way. Hey, it's not, life isn't about being happy. Oh, yes, it is. But if you believe that, great. Then you don't follow any of my stuff. Go get monogamous and go to college and get a job and stay in your collapsing Western country. You'll be miserable, but
Well, I think we have done plenty today. I don't mind if we end it. I'm looking forward to seeing
okay.
you next Sunday, and I'll do some more study of your assertions.
Sure. All right. As usual, if you have questions for either one of us, throw them in the comments. If you have suggestions on what my dad and I should discuss, what would help you. And again, when you give suggestions, it's helpful to give your age because a 28-year-old guy has a bit different set of needs than a 58-year-old guy. That would be helpful. But we have more to come. We will see you soon.